A very good morning, students. I hope you all are well. Children, today we are going to start the third poem from your first flight book. And the name of the poem is A Tiger in a Zoo by George Leslie Norris. This poem is about a tiger. In this poem, the poet Leslie Norris has explained the agony and helplessness of a caged tiger that lives in a zoo. The poet explains about the condition of animals that are caged by human beings for their own fun. Children, as you all, and not only you, everybody loves to live freely. In the same manner, the poet is also trying to say that the animals also want to live free. Now, children, before starting the poem, let me tell you about the poet. The poet George Leslie Norris, who was born on 1921 and died on 2006, was a prize-winning Welsh poet and short story writer. He is considered as most important Welsh writers of the post-war period, and his literary works have won many prizes. His famous works are Finding Gold, The Loud Winter, Phoenix Living Poet series, that is Ransoms, etc. Now I will read the poem. You have to listen it very carefully. Poetry 3, A Tiger in a Zoo by Leslie Norris. He stalks in his vivid stripes the few steps of his cage on pads of velvet quiet, in his quiet rage. He should be lurking in shadows, sliding through long grass near the water hole where plum deer pass. He should be snarling around houses at the jungle's edge, baring his white fangs, his claws terrorizing the village. But he is locked in a concrete cell, his strength behind bars, stalking the length of his cage, ignoring visitors. He hears the last voice at night, the patrolling cars, and stares with his brilliant eyes at the brilliant stars. So children, this was the poem. Now I'll explain the poem to you stanza wise. So let us see the first stanza of the poem. He stalks in his vivid stripes the few steps of his cage on pads of velvet quiet, in his quiet rage. So the meaning of the difficult word I'll tell you. In this stanza, the first word is stalks, that means follows. Second word is vivid, that means bright colored. Third word is pads, that means paws of tiger. The fourth is rage, which means anger. So here the poet says that the tiger that is confined in the zoo moves around in the cage under his bright colored skin. He further says that the tiger can take only a few steps because the cage is small and it is not easy to move in it. One cannot hear his footsteps because he has very soft feet like velvet, because of which there is no sound of tiger's footsteps. The tiger tries to control his anger by quietly walking in the limited area of his cage. He is angry because he is not free. So this was the first stanza. The second stanza is, he should be lurking in shadow, sliding through long grass near the water hole where plum deer pass. So the hard word in this stanza is lurking, and the meaning is to be hidden as to wait for your prey. The poet says that if this tiger was free, he would have hid himself behind the long grass near the water bodies so that he could easily catch a deer in order to have it as its food. Basically, the poet wants to say that the actual life of a tiger is to live in jungle where he could catch his prey and eat it. But the tiger in the cage cannot do so. Now let us come to the third stanza. He should be snarling around houses at the jungle's edge, baring his white fangs, his claws, terrorizing the village. The hard words in this stanza are, the first is snarling, that means warning sounds made by animals. Second is baring, which means uncovered. Third is fangs, that means sharp tooth of animals. In this stanza, the poet says that if the tiger would have been free, he would have snarled around the houses located at the outskirts of the forest. He would terrorize people with his sharp tooth and claws. This would create fear among the people living in the villages. Now let us come to the fourth stanza, that is, but he is locked in a concrete cell, his strength behind bars, stalking the length of his cage, ignoring visitors. So the hard word in this stanza is concrete. That means building made of bricks, cement, sand and water, or you can say the mixture of cement, sand and water, that is known as concrete. Here in this stanza, the poet says that the poet comes to the reality of the tiger that is inside the cage. He says that the tiger is confined in a strong cell which is made of strong building material. He further says that as the tiger is behind bars, so his ferociousness is also behind the bars. He just stalks in the cage. He never tries to terrorize the visitors because his power is restricted by the cage. Therefore, he never tries to terrorize the visitors as he cannot attack them. Now, the last stanza, that is, he hears the last voice at night, the patrolling cars, and stares with his brilliant eyes at the brilliant stars. Here the hard word in this stanza is patrolling, and which means to guard. In this stanza, the poet says that in the night, the tiger hears the sounds of the patrolling cars. Patrolling cars are the vehicles of police which are used to guard at night. So, in the night, the tiger hears the sound of these cars. He then stares at the shining stars with his shining eyes. The poet wants to say that the tiger is sad, and as he is confined in the cage, so he cannot do anything. Therefore, he stares at the stars in the night and tries to divert his thought towards them. So children, this was the poem. Now children, let me tell you the summary of the poem. The poem begins with a description of a tiger that is very beautiful and is walking in his little cage. He has beautiful stripes on his skin and has velvet-like soft paws. But the tiger is not happy and is quite angry about being confined in the cage. The poet says that if the tiger was not confined to the zoo cage, he would have been hiding himself behind the long grass near some water body in order to catch his prey, that is the deer. Also, he would have terrorized the residents of the villages around the forest area. But the reality is totally opposite to this. He was confined in a cage which was made up of strong building material, and he was helpless there. He could not show his power to the visitors. Therefore, he never tried to terrorize them. The tiger is described as being powerless by the poet. He says that during night also he is alone, hearing the voice of the patrolling vehicles of police and looking at the stars. The cage life has totally changed the tiger's personality. The poet is trying to say that the animal is very sad. He is famous for its power and freedom, but it is confined and is very sad due to the human beings who want to derive pleasure by looking at him in the zoo cage. So this was the short summary of the poem. Now children, we will see the poetic devices that are used in the poem. You can write these poetic devices in your rough notebook. The first one is rhyme scheme. The rhyme scheme of the poem is ABCB. The second is personification. When some human attribute is used to the animal, it is called personification. So in the poem, he is used by the poet for the tiger. So this is called personification. Third is metaphor. In metaphor, two things are compared which has no similarity. For example, paws and velvet. It has no similarity, but still it is compared in the poem. So this is metaphor. Fourth is enjambment. As I have told you in the last poem also, that when the lines are continuously going on without any punctuation mark, it is called enjambment. So in the second stanza, second line, sliding through long grass near the water hole where plump deer pass. So there was no use of any punctuation. So this is called enjambment. Now the fifth one is imagery. Imagery, here vivid stripes give you the visual image of the tiger. So this is called imagery. Now the sixth one is alliteration. He hears the repetition of consonant sound. Her sound is repeated here. He hears. So the repetition of consonant sound is known as alliteration. And seventh is assonance. In this, the repetition of vowel sound is there in between the words. For example, the E sound is repeated in with his brilliant, with I, his, again I, then brilliant I. So this E sound is repeated with his brilliant. So these are the poetic devices that are used in the poem. Now at last, let us have a look at the central idea of the poem. The poem A Tiger in a Zoo by Leslie Norris is the poem in which the poet tries to depict the mental condition of a caged tiger. He compares the life of a tiger in the zoo with its life in its natural habitat. Where is the natural habitat of the tiger? It is in the forest. The poet conveys an important message that the wild animals should be in their natural habitat. In this poem, he highlights the contrast between freedom and captivity. He very impressively shows us how love for freedom is the natural instinct of every living being. So, this was the central idea of the poem. I hope students you all have understood the poem. Thank you.